passing lane. Sky's a jam. Dynamite dunk and the crowd loves
it. Let's go. Pistons get a massive big time win. First win of the season. Welcome back to Pistons Intellect, your home for the most informed Detroit Pistons news and analysis. I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Kelly_3on3. And before we get into today's show, if you're feeling so kind, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're feeling extra kind, drop a like and a comment below. I'd really appreciate it. Share your thoughts on the Detroit's first win of the season against the Charlotte Hornets in Charlotte. Come away with the victory, 111-99. And what a game it was. There's a ton of places we could start with this game. I mean, what a performance, really. I mean, the first place I think we're going to start with, it's not an individual player. It's not any one person, any one play. I think you got to start with the defense in this game. Pistons came out once again, like they did against the Heat, with a newfound kind of physicality and mindset and intensity, which I haven't seen from this team consistently, at least in the past 2 to 3 years I've been making kind of Pistons content. But for as long as I've been a fan, like, this intensity they've come out with is awesome to see. And I think it starts with Coach Monty Williams and his lead defensive assistant, Dan Burke. For those that might have forgotten, Dan Burke joined the staff this year with Coach Monty Williams. Amongst NBA circles, he's one of the most respected defensive minds in the league. He's been an assistant for 35 years, or almost 35 years, my mistake. And he spent 23 years with the Pacers from the late 90s all the way up till the end of the 2010s. And he's clearly had an effect on this team because, I mean, the defense is what won this game. It's what kept them in the game against Miami. Everyone on the court is fighting through screens. They're closing out. They're playing great transition defense, which has been very important with all the turnovers the Pistons been coughing up. But to see them get back in transition and make plays, it's been super encouraging. There's a number of players we can go to. I think we start with that starting five, though. For the issues I have with them offensively, all five of those guys are gritty on defense. It starts with Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart controlling the paint and the boards. And then you've got Asar Thompson, who finished with 12 rebounds tonight, flying in, weak side, help side blocks. Then you've got Killian and Cade, who are both gritty on-ball defenders, who have length, who have size. They're doing their bit. So it was really a complete performance on the defensive end. There's so much versatility. Everyone's got that 7 foot plus wingspan or close to it. And if they don't have that wingspan, they're 6'5", 6'6". Everyone seems really strong. Like Jaden Ivey in his second year is strong. Every single player's put on muscle. It's a real Detroit style team, which it was a bit before my time, but this gritty style of defense, it's messy, it's ugly, but it's kind of what's been in Detroit's DNA when they've been successful with the bad boys and obviously the going to work crews. So to see them come out for the second game in a row and play that defense, I think was super encouraging. To have that really strong start to the game, and it's all coming from the defensive end, and especially after an opening night close, narrow victory, to come out and play that way and set the tone defensively is really encouraging for a young team. And Pistons fans should be seriously excited, because in the past, you can bet your bottom dollar, at least from the games I've watched, if they come off a really close, narrow loss to a good team like the Heat, there's every chance in the past they get absolutely blown out, particularly against a team like Charlotte, who have been a bit of a bogey team in recent history, especially in Charlotte. So to come out and get this win is huge, and it started with the defensive end. And I've just got some numbers here for you. Through the first two games, the Pistons have held their two opponents to 38% shooting from the field, which is just an obscenely low number. And because it's such a small sample size, some might say, well, look, it's an outlier. But if you watch the games, you see the Pistons flying around, contesting shots. That 38% is legit. That's real. the opponents are shooting 30% from three, so they're closing out, getting good contests. And yes, once again, 3-point shooting can be seen as an outlier and luck, but I believe from the contests we've seen, the closeouts, the shots the Pistons are forcing opponents into, that 30% is legit. And then on the boards, the Pistons are plus 20 over their opponents. So they've out-rebounded their opponents 108 to 88 across 2 games. So to see the Pistons field that big front line of Stu and Duren and see them to have this success early is really good, because that will be the argument people would push back on fielding 2 bigs like Stu and Duren who aren't known as shooters is, well, are they going to bring it enough defensively? I think a lot of people thought maybe this kind of play was a season away. I think I may have felt that. Some people might even not envision this defensive level at all. And those people still have a case because we're only 2 games in. I'm not getting ahead of myself, but so far, Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren together have looked dominant on the defensive end, on the glass, and then they're looking pretty decent offensively alongside Cade Cunningham. So those are just some numbers, and the final one is just the block shots, which is often the result of sort of good rotations and well-timed defensive rotations from players. The Pistons are plus 9, so they've had 19 blocks so far in 2 games, which is a very high number. 13 of those did come against the Heat, which is an absurdly high number, but they are plus 9 in terms of block shots against their opponents. So the Pistons are well and truly controlling the interior, and I'm really excited to see how they go against Chicago tomorrow. A 3-game sample size is still very, very small, but I'll be interested to see where they rank in the league in terms of these defensive numbers. But yeah, super encouraging on the defensive end. And finally, just want to give a shout out to JD, who finished with 14 points, 17 rebounds, and 2 blocks. Just another monster game for him. He was 6 or 7 from the field, so he's rolling to the rim, he's finishing plays, he's not missing. He's just eating the glass. He looks like he came into the league at 18 years old, as we all know, and he looked like a man-child, but he just looks, I don't know if it's the haircut or he's more well-defined, but he is looking like a fully grown 28-year-old man out there, and the fact he's still 19 is mind-boggling, but he's looked good defensively, and that was what I wanted to see from him for this season, was his defensive work. And he still might have some rotation lapses and that kind of thing, but him just being so dominant of a rebounder and really asserting himself physically on either end of the floor is really helping this team. And then Asar Thompson finished with 6 points, 12 boards and a block, and he had a plus 10. The Pistons plus minus with him on the floor was plus 10. So, and that was second best on the team. So look, still struggling a bit offensively, but he's making those connective passes we want to see. And defensively for a rookie, I would say there's Victor Wembanyama and then there's Asar Thompson in terms of defense right now. Yes, it's early, but shout out to those 2 guys. This defense, this is what will help keep the Pistons in games all season long for all 82 games, and this is what's going to ultimately help them make that leap from 20 wins to 30 wins or to potentially more. We don't know yet. It's very early, but it's very, very encouraging so far. Now, there's a couple of other players I want to get to here and show some love for their performances throughout the game. There was multiple players who each had their moments in certain quarters to keep the Pistons alive and ultimately help them win. And the first one I think we have to start with is my guy, the guy I love watching the most on the Pistons in terms of his attitude, his grit, his emotions, his leadership, and that's Isaiah Stewart. He was somewhat quiet, at least offensively, throughout the first few quarters, but come the final quarter, he was big time. He finished the game with 15 points, but 11 of those came in the last quarter, and he had 2 huge 3-pointers. It felt like each time Charlotte got the lead back to 4 or 6, he was able to come down and confidently knock down a 3. And he made 2 of those big ones to just extend it back to that 7 points, 9-point range, just to sort of keep the Pistons afloat, especially while Cade was off the floor dealing with foul trouble. And then on the other end, he had a really good block shot. And then he finished with 7 boards. So he was doing work there. And then he got to the free throw line. And then there was that controversial hit from PJ Washington when the Pistons had the game 1 that was ultimately a flagrant 2. So Stu, he was in the heads of the opponent. He was yapping. He was firing his teammates up. And this is now his second game in a row in Charlotte where he's played extremely well. He got up for a lob dunk in transition. So although he's not the most bouncy guy off the dribble or with ball in hand, if you can set him up, he can get up for those lobs. He's got that ridiculous 7'4" wingspan, so he's got a high catch radius if he gets a full head of steam. So yeah, he was, I mean, we say it a lot, and Isaiah Stewart fans will back this in, that he is kind of the heart and soul of this team, and I'm a big believer in that mattering. I haven't always believed in those kind of, I don't know if you call it intangibles, but that heart and soul leader, but he truly is that, and that is well known throughout the organisation, and I know he is one of Troy Weaver's personal favourites, if not favourite player on the team. So to see him have this kind of start to the season, where I think he was 2 of 3 from 3 in the opener, and I think he might have been 2 of 3 again tonight, so shooting well over 50%, although a very limited volume, considering the preseason he had. To see him knock down these threes, timely threes as well, is huge. And there was particularly, he took a 3, I believe it was at the top of the key, missed it pretty bad. Asar Thompson comes up with the offensive rebound, kicks it back to Stu, who just, with no hesitation, launches it again and knocks it down. And that was one of those real momentum killers for the Hornets, who had got it back to 4, and then he knocked that down. So Stu was excellent. The next guy I want to get to is Jaden Ivey. He was probably the biggest loser of opening night in terms of struggling and not being able to find a rhythm. So to see him come out tonight, finish with 18 points and 4 assists in just over 20 minutes was super, super impressive. He wasn't pressing like he had the past couple of games. He's more steady, particularly in the third quarter when Cade picked up his 4th foul with only, I think, 9 minutes, with only a few minutes into the third. Jaden came in and he was crucial in sort of keeping the Pistons just ahead enough and stemming the tide while Cade was off. He finished with, as I said, 18 for the game. He shot 7 of 12 from the field, had some really nice passes, and they were the variety I mentioned in the first review, where it's that drive and dump off or drive and kick to a shooter, which he can just do so naturally with that first step. He blows by that first line of defense with ease a lot of the time. So if he can draw the help and then he just has an open Jalen Duren there to drop it off to, that's where Jaden Ivey is so lethal. So excellent game from him, and his defense as well. He had some silly fouls, well, not silly fouls, but fouls where he's ultra aggressive, so he's very handsy, and he gave away a foul off the ball kind of on an inbound. But, I mean, he also had some really good possessions on LaMelo Ball where he forced LaMelo to pick his dribble up and pass it. So, I'll take the fouls if he's playing with that kind of intensity. And I think the coaching staff would be aligned in that thinking, that if he's going to give up some fouls like that from showing super high energy and effort, then you live with that, because that's the end of the floor. He needs to continue to keep that same energy, and I think tonight's a really good stepping stone towards him getting back into that starting lineup at some point. But really good game, great bounce back. Jaden's one of the hardest workers on the team. That's a fact. So hopefully he can build from this and just keep this consistency up at both ends of the floor. So great game from him. Then finally, the last guy who probably you could argue was man of the match, that was Alec Burks, the Pistons veteran off the bench. He really had a monster game. He finished with a team high plus minus of plus 28, and he finished with 24 points, got to the line 12 times, and just anytime the Pistons needed a bucket or the offense got a bit stagnant, he was there to the rescue. He knocked down a couple of threes, a huge 3, I think, that put the Pistons up by 12 with under 2 minutes to go, which really was the nail in the coffin. Aside that 3 towards the end of the game to sort of seal it, he was huge in the first half, particularly the second quarter. Once again, when Cade was out with foul trouble, he had 15 in the first half. So he was the guy keeping the offense going. Pistons really got stuck on 36 around the start of the second quarter, and he was the guy sort of to get the offense going again. Charlotte got the lead back to Pistons only led by like 4, 5, 6 maybe, and then Alec Burks just helped keep the offense going with his shot making, his ability to get to the free throw line. I'm begging him to teach some of his foul drawing ways to Cade, because I know some will say Cade struggles to get to the line, but I think Cade sort of struggles to sell the contact. I spoke about this on DBB Live, or the pin down, I should say, with my guy Wes Davenport on Thursday night. But Cade needs to do a better job at selling the call, I think. So Alec Burks, I hope he can teach him some of those ways. He sort of flings his arms and uses his shoulders to grift fouls, because as much as people don't like that, it's an effective way to get to the free throw line. And I mean, he was excellent. So look, that starting lineup has its issues with the shooting. I don't think we'll see a change now, especially after a win like that. I think this starting lineup sort of set for the moment, but if there's a guy to come in, it's Alec Burks. But he's also just as good as that microwave off the bench. So really, really good game from Alec Burks. Finally, there's a few areas as well coming out of the win that I think are worth highlighting in areas for improvement. And I think the first guy you have to look at is Cade Cunningham. Finished the game, I believe, with 12 points, had 6 assists, but the foul trouble, the foul issues are something that's plagued Cade, honestly, since he got to the NBA. I can't recall if this was an issue in high school or college, but since he's been with the Pistons, he just seems to, a lot of these fouls come from him being aggressive defensively, but then he has some that are just team killers, and I think he would understand the impact it has on the team, because taking him out of the game is obviously to the detriment of the Pistons. And he had just a couple of fouls where they were just uncalled for. I think he picked up his 4th foul with around 9 minutes to go in the third, or 8 minutes, and it was on, I believe, PJ Washington sort of caught it around the dunker spot after the Hornets had collapsed the defense. It was on Nick Richards, and Nick Richards was always going to dunk it, and Cade had 3 fouls, and Cade went up for the contest and fouled him, and that's just a spot where you just let Nick Richards have the dunk. You know, you're Cade Cunningham, you're the starting point guard of this team, you're the leader. This is a close game on the road. Your teammates need you. He isn't doing it. It's not a selfish act at all. He's doing it for the right reasons, to make a play on the ball and try and get a deflection. That's how he plays, but that's just a play you let Nick Richards go up and dunk it. And then in the 4th quarter, with 9 minutes 22 to play, once again in a close ball game, Cade, just Theo Maledon, who's at this point a journeyman point guard, playing backup minutes for the Hornets, he just has this reach-in foul on him as he's driving to the rim. And I mean, that one wasn't as questionable as the Nick Richards ones, but that's probably when you just keep your hands up, Cade. You've got 4 fouls, was still a ton of time to play. Keep your hands up instead of trying to reach in for that steal deflection. But he commits a foul, and ultimately it doesn't hurt the Pistons too much, but those are just 2 plays where it's just they could be plays that ultimately hurt the Pistons to the point where they lose that game because their star player can't be on the court for large chunks of crunch time minutes. And he ended up fouling out of this one, I think, with 2 minutes to go or something. And look, it didn't matter, but it's just those fouls. He's got to have more, I don't want to say more game awareness, because Cade's, that's one of the brilliant things about him is his IQ and his basketball intellect. But I guess, yeah, it is more awareness of the time and, you know, where the game's at and the importance he has to his team. And I've no doubt he's aware of this off the court and when he's not in the heat of the moment. But that was probably the one negative with him, as well as some turnovers. He finished with 5 turnovers. He had a couple of these against Miami as well. Just sort of, sometimes he'll just have these sloppy passes, and it's sometimes he gets away with it because they catch the defense off guard. But because he doesn't really telegraph passes, Cade. That's one of the beautiful things about him, is he's so manipulative and stuff. But I think sometimes his passes just don't have enough zip. And if you've got a guy like Terry Rozier in the area, or someone who's just like a ball hawking type guard, like they can eat that up at times. So just another minor thing, not the best game from Cade, but the encouraging thing is the team's able to win. And then the final thing I just wanted to touch on was just a lineup thing I noticed, and I believe it was in the 2nd quarter. the Pistons had Marvin Bagley at the 5, and then I think they had Joe Harris at the 4. And I noticed that the lack of essentially having Marvin Bagley out there with no kind of weak side rim protector or help side rim protector like Isaiah Stewart or Asar Thompson is probably not the move, in my opinion. I noticed that the Hornets just got to the... It's not so much they got to the rim with ease, but they sort of had a lot of easy finishes because Marvin Bagley just isn't that rim protector. He's probably never going to be at this point. So I think you need to play Asar or Stewart alongside Bagley like they did in the third quarter and parts of the fourth, if Bagley was on. Just to provide that rim protection and just to help him on the glass. But Marvin Bagley did have another highly efficient game off the bench. He finished with, I believe, 13 points and 5 rebounds, somewhere in that region. 14 points and 5 rebounds. So another really good game offensively for Bagley. He's well and truly cemented that backup 5 position and has been really, really solid. I think it's more of a supporting him as opposed to him sort of fixing his game. I think the coaching staff, and they made that adjustment in the second half, but just ensuring he's got someone who can sort of help on the glass and provide that weak side rim protection when he's sort of caught up in pick and roll and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, super game from Bagley offensively, and definitely a great start for him. All right, guys, that'll do it for today's recap of your Detroit Pistons' first win of the season in Charlotte against the Hornets. We'll be back tomorrow following the Bulls game to give you a recap of hopefully another victory, but ultimately just an awesome night. First win of the season, vibes are high. I want you guys to join me for all 82 games, or all 80 games I should say, for the rest of the season. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop below your favorite moments of the game, any lineup changes you think need to be made, or just anything I might have missed in discussion, something you love. But drop it below in the comments. Can't wait to have a chat with you about it. But until tomorrow night, go Pistons.